The world grows quiet, and the story begins. Welcome, everyone, to the Sounds of Stories. Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the Sounds of Stories. Tonight, we're opening the pages of one of literature's most unforgettable tales, The Open Window, originally written by Saki, the pen name of Hector Hugh Munro. Though first published in 1914, this deceptively simple story has become one of the greatest examples of a twist ending ever written, proving that sometimes the most dangerous thing in a room isn't a ghost, it's a clever imagination. But tonight we're telling it a little differently. We've called this episode, They Always Come Back. So, dim the lights, settle into your favorite chair, and let the pages turn. The gravel crunched beneath Ethan Carter's tires as his SUV rolled to a stop. He sat for a moment without moving. Just sat. That was new for him. 6 months ago, he couldn't have done it, couldn't have tolerated 3 seconds of stillness without reaching for his phone, opening a report, answering something. His entire life had been structured around the premise that stopping was the same thing as falling behind. He'd been a crisis negotiator for 11 years. Not the movie kind, not the kind who talked jumpers off ledges with swelling music in the background, but the real kind. Hostage situations, barricaded suspects, domestic standoffs. The kind where you stayed on the phone for 9 hours and said the right words in exactly the right order, and if you got one piece wrong, well, someone died. He'd gotten it wrong once. Just once. A 14-year-old boy named Marcus in a school gymnasium in rural Ohio. Ethan had read the situation a certain way. He'd been so sure he'd staked everything on a specific interpretation of the boy's words. And he'd been wrong about what Marcus meant. Wrong about what he needed. Wrong about what was going to happen next. The aftermath had lasted longer than the incident itself. The inquiry, the leave of absence, the sessions with Dr. Reyes, who had finally 6 weeks ago said the words with a gentleness that somehow made them worse. Ethan, you need to stop reading every room you walk into. Just for a little while. Go somewhere quiet. Don't analyze anything. Well, here he was. The house stood alone at the edge of a sprawling forest, its white paint faded to the color of old paper. Towering pines swayed in the evening breeze. A single crow crossed the sky and disappeared into the trees. He stepped out and breathed. Cool air, pine, damp earth. Nothing requiring interpretation. Maybe this will help, he thought. Maybe. He grabbed his bag and walked up the creaking porch steps. Before he could knock, the front door opened. A girl, perhaps 16, stood smiling at him. Long brown hair rested neatly over one shoulder. Her expression was warm and open, the kind of face that seemed to expect nothing from you. You must be Mr. Carter. I am. I'm Vera. She stepped aside. My aunt had to run into town. She asked me to make you comfortable while she's gone. Ethan nodded politely and stepped inside. The living room was warm, stone fireplace, cedar-scented air, old photographs along the mantel, the kind of room that had been lived in honestly. Nothing in it was arranged for guests. But one thing caught his attention. The enormous picture window at the back of the room stood wide open. Outside, the forest darkened beneath gathering clouds. A cool breeze drifted through the gap, lifting the curtains like slow breath. Ethan frowned. Are you cold? Vera glanced toward the window. No. A pause. It has to stay open. Even in this weather? My aunt insists. He looked at the trees beyond the glass. Don't analyze it, he reminded himself. It's just a window. Seems unusual, he said anyway. Vera's smile faded, just slightly.
"It is," she said. "You see, 3 years ago, my uncle and 2 cousins walked into those woods."
She pointed toward the pines.
"And they never came home."
Ethan said nothing for a moment. The professional part of him, the part he was supposed to be resting, registered the girl's posture, her tone, the measured way she delivered the information. Not the stumbling grief of someone still raw, not the rehearsed flatness of someone who had told the story too many times. It was something else. It was something in between. "Stop it," he told himself. "You're doing it again." "I'm sorry," he said. "That must be very hard."
"The police searched for weeks." Her voice remained steady. "They found nothing. No footprints, no equipment, anything."
A gust of wind swept through the room. The curtains rose and fell.
"My aunt believes they'll return someday."
Vera looked toward the forest.
"So every evening she leaves the window open."
Ethan exhaled slowly. "Grief," he told himself. "Just grief. People survive loss in strange ways." "I suppose hope keeps people going," he offered. Vera didn't answer. She simply stared through the open window. Then, almost too quietly to hear, she whispered,
"They always come back before sunset."
The hair rose on Ethan's neck. "Not grief," said the part of his brain he couldn't quiet. "Something else." He turned toward the mantel, needing something to look at. Old photograph in mismatched frames, 3 smiling men in camouflage outside a weathered cabin. A family Christmas, a summer barbecue. Then he noticed the boots. 3 pairs of muddy hunting boots lined up neatly beside the back door. He crossed them slowly. The mud on the soles glistened. Not dried, not cracked, not the preserved residue of a pair of boots left untouched for 3 years. Fresh. He crouched. The mud was almost wet. "Were these your uncle's?"
"Yes," Vera said. "They've been there since."
He reached toward one.
"Don't."
Her voice stopped him.
"They don't like people touching their things."
A chill crept up his spine, involuntarily, which irritated him. He was not a man who got chills. "You mean your aunt?" Vera smiled.
"I wasn't talking about my aunt."
From somewhere deep in the forest, a single low whistle. Long, mournful, the kind that didn't quite sound like a bird. Ethan stood. Every protocol he'd ever learned about reading a situation told him the same thing simultaneously. Something is wrong here, and you're not equipped right now to figure out what it is. He moved to the window anyway. The yard was empty. The tree line stood still. No birds, no insects, not even wind anymore. The curtains had gone flat. He started to step back, and that's when he saw them. The footprints. Large muddy boot prints leading out of the trees, crossing the yard, coming toward the house. He hadn't seen them a minute ago. He was certain of it. "Vera."
"I see them,"
she said. "Those weren't there."
"They usually aren't."
"What do you mean, usually?" She folded her hands in her lap, patient as a professor.
"They only appear when someone's coming home."
3 slow knocks echoed from outside. Knock, knock, knock. Ethan's blood ran cold. Not the front porch and not the back door. The wall beside the window. He told himself there was a rational explanation. There was always a rational explanation. In 11 years of crisis work, he had never once encountered a situation that didn't reduce eventually to human behavior or human error. People were frightening enough on their own without anything else. He believed that with his whole chest. He checked the front door, empty porch, empty road. He checked the side of the house through the window. Nothing. He turned back to Vera, who had not moved from her chair, had not looked alarmed, had not even fully straightened up. "There's no one out there," he said. "I know." "Then who's knocking?" She looked toward the open window. "They never used the front door." Outside, the last light was draining from the sky. Ethan pressed himself to the wall beside the window and looked out at an angle the way he'd been trained to approach uncertain sightlines. The footprints were still there. And then, movement. 3 figures at the tree line. Far away at first, barely silhouettes against the dark wall of pines. Each one carried something over his shoulder, long and narrow. Hunting rifles. They walked slowly, steadily, without urgency, the walk of men who knew exactly where they were going and had no reason to hurry. "Vera," his voice came out lower than he intended. "Who are those people?" "I told you," she said softly. "They're coming home." The figures drew closer. He could make out the details now. Broad-brimmed hats, heavy coats streaked with mud, boots that left fresh prints in the soft earth with every step. One of them walked with a slight hitch in his gait. Another whistled. The same tune Ethan had heard from the trees, note for note. "This is a prank," he thought. "She's done this before. The girl lures a guest, the family plays along, everyone has a good laugh." It was really the only rational answer, and he almost had himself convinced. Then the tallest of the 3 lifted his hat and waved. Not toward Ethan, toward Vera. And Vera waved back the way you wave at someone whose face you know, whose wave you recognize, whose return you've been waiting for. "They always wave first," she said. Ethan grabbed his bag. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't offer an explanation. He simply moved through the front door, off the porch, across the gravel, and threw himself into the driver's seat. Behind him, from the yard, a man's cheerful voice drifted through the evening air. "Looks like we've got company." Another one laughed. "Well, had company." The engine roared. The tires screamed. Ethan drove. In the rearview mirror, growing smaller with every second, 3 hunters standing outside an open window watched him go. None of them moved to follow. None of them called after him. They just simply stood there, smiling. He drove for 6 miles before he had to pull over. His hands were shaking. Not badly. He'd had worse, after worse situations, but enough that he noticed. Enough that he registered the fact of his own fear with something like embarrassment. He was a man who had spent 11 years being the calmest person in terrible rooms. He did not shake over 3 hunters walking out of the woods. "You misread it," said one of the familiar voices in the back of his skull, the one that had been running a commentary on his failures since Ohio. "You saw what you were primed to see. You walked into that house already rattled, already soft, and a 16-year-old girl told you a story and you believed every word of it." He was still sitting there, engine idling, when headlights rounded the bend ahead. A pickup truck. It braked, skidded slightly on the gravel, and stopped a few feet in front of his bumper. A middle-aged man climbed out, expression caught between irritation and concern. "Easy there! You almost put us both in the ditch!" Ethan stepped out. "You need to leave," he said. "Right now. The house back there, the Harper place?" He stopped. "You know it?"
My wife and I are headed there for dinner. The man's tone softened. Best venison chili in the county. You want to slow down and tell me what's got you spooked? The word spooked landed somewhere unpleasant.
3 men came out of the woods, Ethan said. The girl, Vera, she told me they disappeared 3 years ago. She said her aunt leaves the window open, waiting for them to come back, and then they... He stopped himself. Said out loud, in the cooling evening air, standing beside a sensible pickup truck on a county road, the story did something it hadn't done inside the house. It sounded like a story. The man was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed, not cruelly, but with the particular warmth of someone who recognized something. Did she now? Ethan felt the ground shift slightly under him. You've heard this before?
Son, the man shook his head. Vera has quite an imagination. Has since she was small. Every new visitor gets a different story. He folded his arms, almost fond. Last month, she convinced a delivery driver the place was haunted. Month before that, told a realtor the woods were cursed by a farmer who died on the land 100 years back. He raised an eyebrow. Sounds like today you got the hunting story. Ethan stood very still. The whistle he'd heard, the footprints appearing in the yard, the wet mud on the boots, the wave. Every detail rearranged itself, the same facts reordered into a different shape. The boots had probably been muddy because they were used. The whistle had been one of the men returning from an ordinary afternoon. The footprints had been there all along, and he simply hadn't looked down. He had walked into that house already primed for dread, already inclined to read every room like a threat. And Vera had known that somehow, or guessed it, or simply created the right conditions and let him do the rest.
You read the situation, said the voice. You were so certain. They're alive? He asked.
Very much, the man grinned. Been out hunting all afternoon. My nephews. He glanced at his phone as it buzzed. My sister says dinner's ready. He opened the truck door and looked back at Ethan. You coming? Ethan sat at the dinner table and ate venison chili and tried to remember the last time he had felt this specific shade of foolish. The 3 hunters were exactly what they appeared to be. Alive, tired, good-natured, and completely unbothered by the panicked stranger who had apparently sprinted from their house 20 minutes ago. They asked him no uncomfortable questions. They passed the bread without ceremony. They argued cheerfully about who had spotted the deer first. Their aunt, Margaret Harper, warm and direct, the kind of woman who made rooms feel organized without trying, had apologized for not being home when he arrived and left it at that. Vera sat at the far end of the table and didn't look at him once during dinner. Only when the plates were being cleared, when the hunters had moved to the living room and Margaret was in the kitchen and the table sat mostly empty, did Vera glance across at him. You came back, she said.
I almost didn't.
She nodded. A simple acknowledgement, neither pleased nor surprised. Later, he found her on the porch swing, her feet tucked under her, the evening air gone properly cool now. The great picture window behind them was still open. Of course it was. Fresh air. He understood that now. He sat down on the railing, facing her.
I have to ask, he said.
I know.
Why?
She looked out at the tree line, dark now, ordinary. I never lied to you, she said. Not once. He thought about it. She was right, technically. They had walked into those woods. They hadn't come home yet. That afternoon, her aunt did leave the window open. They did come back before sunset, most evenings.
You just left things out.
I left room, she said, for you to imagine. He was quiet for a moment. The porch swing creaked softly.
How did you know I would? She considered this seriously, the way teenagers sometimes do when adults finally ask them a real question. "You came to the door already listening for something," she said. "Most people do. They arrive somewhere new and they're already writing the story of what kind of place it is, what kind of people live here. I just," she shrugged, "gave you a few details to work with." Ethan thought about Marcus, about the gymnasium, about 9 hours of phone calls and one catastrophic misread. He walked into that situation already certain he knew what kind of story it was. "People don't remember facts," Vera said. "They remember the stories they tell themselves." He looked at her for a moment. "That's a dangerous thing to understand," he said, "at 16. She almost smiled. "I'm 16 next month." He laughed. The first real laugh he'd produced in a long time, he realized. Not the polite kind, the kind that surprises you. When he stood to leave, she called after him. "Mr. Carter?" He turned. "Next time someone tells you a frightening story..." A pause, the smallest smile. "Check what you already believed before they started." He drove back down the lonely county road, the farmhouse disappearing in his mirror. The window was still open behind him. The curtains moved in the evening breeze. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Ethan Carter drove in silence and didn't analyze a single thing. And there you have it. A story proving that the finest twists don't come from ghosts or monsters, but from the quiet brilliance of a story told to exactly the right person at exactly the right moment. Thank you all for joining me on this reimagining of The Open Window. If you enjoyed tonight's journey, I'd be honored if you subscribe to The Sounds of Stories, where timeless classics are brought to life and sometimes told in entirely new ways. For more narrations by me, you can visit thesoundsofstories.com. And until our paths cross again, keep turning those pages. And thanks for spending your time here with us at The Sounds of Stories. Come back for another adventure. And remember, when the world seems to fade, the stories always remain.